What if everything you have been planning, dreaming about, and working toward is actually working against you? Not because your dreams are bad, not because you are doing something wrong, but because you have been doing something in the wrong order, and nobody told you. Right now, in the next few minutes, I am going to show you something that is going to completely change the way you think about your life, your plans, and your relationship with God. This is not a motivational talk. This is not a feel-good message. This is urgent. This is real. And if you are someone who genuinely wants to live a life of purpose, fulfillment, and divine alignment, you cannot afford to miss what I am about to share. So stop what you are doing. Stay right here, because what you are about to hear could be the most important thing you encounter this entire year. And before we go any further, if this is your first time here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications, because we release content like this regularly and you do not want to miss a single video. If you have been here before, you already know what we do here. We go deep, we go real, and we go straight to the truth. So let us get into it. Here is the thing that most people in the church, most believers, most Christians who genuinely love God are doing every single day without even realizing it. They are making their plans first and then bringing God in afterward. They sit down, they write out their goals, they map out their 5-year plan, they figure out what career they want, what city they want to live in, who they want to marry, how many children they want to have, and then they bow their heads and they say, "God, please bless this. God, please make this work. God, I need you to show up for this plan I already made." And they genuinely believe that is what faith looks like. They genuinely believe that is how the relationship between a creator and his creation is supposed to work. But I need you to hear this clearly. That is not surrender. That is negotiation. That is not faith. That is management. You are not asking God to lead you. You are asking God to follow you. And when God does not show up the way you expected, when the plan falls apart, when the dream does not come together the way you imagined, you end up confused, discouraged, and sometimes even angry at God. But the problem was never God. The problem was the order. You planned first. You dreamed first. You decided first. And then you invited God to bless something he never designed. Now I want to be very clear about something. Having plans is not a sin. Having dreams is not wrong. Ambition is not evil. God wired you to think, to imagine, to desire, to create. Those things are not the problem. The problem is when your plans become the starting point instead of God's voice. The problem is when your desires are in the driver's seat and God is just supposed to be the GPS you turn on when you get lost. That is backwards. And deep down, many of you already know this. You have felt it. You have felt that restlessness even when things were going well. You have felt that hollow feeling even in the middle of success. You have achieved something you worked hard for, and instead of feeling fulfilled, you felt empty, and you did not understand why. That emptiness is not random. That confusion is not a coincidence. It is a signal. It is God trying to get your attention and say, come back to the right order. Come back to the design. Because here is what the Word of God says about this. Psalm 32, verse 8. God says, "I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you." Did you catch that? God is not saying, "Tell me what you want and I will try to help." He is saying, "I will instruct you. I will teach you the way." That means there is already a way, there is already a path, there is already a direction, and God knows it. Not because he is watching from a distance and guessing, but because he designed it, he built it, he established it specifically for you. God is not trying to interfere with your plans. He is trying to introduce you to a plan that is infinitely better than anything you could have come up with on your own. And then go to Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5. This is where it gets even more powerful. God says to Jeremiah, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." Think about that for a second. Before Jeremiah took his first breath, God had already assigned him. Before he had a single thought, a single dream, a single ambition of his own, God had already consecrated him. He was known before he was formed. He was called before he was born. That is not just a word for Jeremiah. That is a principle for every person God has ever created. You were known before you were formed. You were set apart before you were born. God did not create you and then figure out what to do with you. He designed you with purpose already embedded in you. The question is not whether you have a purpose. The question is whether you are willing to discover it on His terms instead of yours. And this is where the story gets personal, because I want to tell you something that I have never fully shared before. For a long time in my own life, I had desires, I had interests, I had things I was drawn to, things I thought I was passionate about. And for a while, I pursued them. I worked toward them. I prayed about them. I asked God to bless them. But there was always something off. There was always this quiet friction, this sense that something did not quite fit. Even when things were moving forward, I could not explain it. From the outside, things looked fine. But inside, there was this unsettled feeling that I could not shake. I kept asking God, why does this feel so hard? Why does this not feel right? Why am I not experiencing the peace that you promised? And for a while, I thought the answer was to work harder, to pray more, to just push through. But that is not what God was asking me to do. He was asking me to stop. He was asking me to let go. He was asking me to trust Him enough to step into the unknown instead of clinging to what felt familiar and comfortable. And the turning point came in the most unexpected way. There was a season in my life where I ended up spending a year in a mission house. It was far from home, far from everything I knew, far from my routine, my comfort zone, my community, my plans. And at first, it felt like a detour. It felt like I was being pulled away from the life I was trying to build. But what actually happened during that year changed everything. Because in that unfamiliar place, stripped of all the distractions and the noise and the agenda I had been carrying, something started to surface. Passions I did not know I had, abilities I had never used, a version of myself that I had never met before. Because I had been so busy trying to construct a life according to my own plans that I had never given God the space to show me who He actually made me to be. And when I finally did, when I finally let go and said, God, I do not know what I am doing here, but I trust you, everything started to shift. Not dramatically overnight, but steadily, quietly, profoundly, like a fog lifting, like something finally clicking into place. That is what surrender does. That is what true submission to God's plan produces. Not confusion, not loss, not emptiness, but clarity, identity, a sense of purpose that is so solid and so deep that circumstances cannot shake it. And this is not just my story. This is the testimony of everyone who has ever truly surrendered to God's design for their life. The fulfillment that comes from walking in God's purpose is unlike anything you can manufacture through your own planning. It is not just satisfaction. It is not just achievement. It is wholeness. It is the kind of peace that Paul described in Philippians 4, the peace that surpasses all understanding. You cannot logic your way into it. You cannot plan your way into it. It only comes through surrender. And I want to talk about what that surrender actually produces, because I think a lot of people are afraid to surrender because they think it means losing something. They think giving their plans to God means giving up their dreams. They think submission means diminishment. But that is the complete opposite of what the word shows us. When you surrender to God's purpose, you do not lose His presence, you gain it. The Bible is filled with this pattern. When people step into alignment with what God designed, His presence becomes tangible. His favor becomes visible. His provision shows up in ways that cannot be explained by logic or strategy. Think about the disciples when Jesus called them. They were not sitting around waiting to be called. They were living their lives, doing their work, running their businesses. But the moment they said yes to His direction, their entire capacity was multiplied. They went from catching fish to changing the world. That is not an exaggeration. That is the biblical record. Surrender does not shrink your life. It expands it beyond anything your natural mind could have imagined. And then there is Abraham. I have to talk about Abraham because this story is one of the most powerful illustrations of this principle in all of Scripture. God asked Abraham to do something that made absolutely no logical sense. Take your son, your only son, the son you have waited for, the son who carries the promise, and go to the region of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. Not just any mountain, a specific mountain. That detail matters more than most people realize. God said, I will tell you which mountain. And Abraham went. He did not negotiate. He did not say, God, can we do this closer to home? He did not say, God, can I pick the mountain? He obeyed obeyed the specific instruction, he went to the specific place, he followed the specific direction, and when he got there, when he had demonstrated total surrender, the provision appeared. A ram caught in a thicket, right there on Mount Moriah. Not on a different mountain, not somewhere else along the way, exactly where God had directed him to go. Think about what that means. If Abraham had gone to a different mountain, there would have been no ram. If Abraham had stopped halfway and tried to find his own solution, there would have been no ram. The provision was specifically positioned on the specific mountain that God designated, and the only way to access that provision was to follow the specific instruction. That is not just a story about Abraham. That is a template for how God operates in every single one of our lives. The provision is already prepared. The ram is already in the thicket, but it is located on a specific mountain. And that mountain is the one God is calling you to, not the one you chose, not the one that looks most comfortable or most logical or most impressive to the people around you, the one He designated, the one He prepared, the one that is connected to the purpose He embedded in you before you were even born. And the only way to find it is to stop going to your own mountains and start following His voice to His mountain. This is why so many people are exhausted. This is why so many believers feel like they are working so hard and seeing so little return, not because they are lazy, not because they lack faith, but because they are climbing the wrong mountains. They are putting all of their energy into directions they chose without consulting the one who already prepared the provision, and God is not punishing them for that. God is not withholding from them out of anger, but the provision is not on that mountain. The provision is on the mountain He designated, and until they are willing to change direction and follow His leading instead of their own logic, they will keep arriving at peaks that are empty. Now, I want to address something that I know some of you are thinking right now. You are thinking, okay, but how do I actually know what God's plan is? How do I discern His direction? How do I tell the difference between His voice and my own desires? And that is a genuinely important question, because surrender is not passivity. Trusting God with your plans does not mean sitting still and doing nothing. It means staying in relationship with Him closely enough that His voice becomes recognizable. It means spending time in His Word so that His principles become the filter through which you evaluate your decisions. It means prayer that is not a list of requests, but an actual conversation, a two-way exchange where you are as willing to listen as you are to speak. It means paying attention to the desires He places in you through the process of seeking Him, because Psalm 37:4 says, "When you delight yourself in the Lord, He gives you the desires of your heart." Not just any desires, the desires He places there. And there is a difference. The desires that come from spending time in His presence are different from the desires that come from comparison, from culture, from fear, from ego. Learning to tell the difference is part of the journey, but the journey starts with surrender. It starts with the posture of saying, God, I am not bringing you my plan to bless. I am bringing you my life to direct. And when that shift happens, when that posture becomes your default, everything changes. I am not just saying that to be encouraging. I am saying it because it is consistently what the Word demonstrates and what the testimonies of surrendered believers confirm generation after generation. The strength that comes from walking in God's purpose is not ordinary strength. Isaiah 40:31 says, "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." That kind of strength is not available to the person who is running their own race to their own destination. That kind of strength is specifically released in the life of someone who is moving in alignment with God's design. It is the strength that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be, doing exactly what you were created to do, moving in the exact direction the Creator of the universe is leading you toward. And the path that God puts you on, the Bible describes it in a very specific way. Proverbs 3:6 says, "In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." Straight, not winding, not confusing, not constantly doubling back and starting over. Straight. That is what a life of surrender looks like from the outside. It does not mean there are no challenges. It does not mean there are no difficult seasons, but there is a directness to it. There is a clarity. There is a sense of forward momentum that does not depend on perfect circumstances because it is being powered by divine direction. That straight path is available to you, but you have to choose it. You have to choose surrender over strategy. You have to choose his voice over your plans. You have to choose the mountain he designates over the mountain you prefer. So I want to close with this. Right now, wherever you are, whatever you have been planning, whatever you have been working toward, I want to invite you to do something. I want to invite you to pray a prayer of real surrender. Not the kind where you list everything you want and ask God to bless it, but the kind where you say, God, I release my grip on my own plans. I release my desires, my timelines, my ideas of what my life is supposed to look like. I open my hands and I say, lead me. I do not want a life that I built with your name attached to it. I want a life that you designed with your purpose inside it. Show me the mountain you have already prepared. Lead me to the provision you have already positioned. I trust that what you have planned for me is better than anything I could plan for myself, and I am willing to find out just how true that is. If you just prayed that with me, even silently, I want to know. Drop a comment below and just say surrendered, or write out what that prayer meant to you. Your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to read today to take the same step. And if this message hit you, if it stirred something in you, if it gave you language for something you have been feeling but could not articulate, please share this video. Send it to someone who is exhausted from climbing the wrong mountains. Send it to someone who has been negotiating with God instead of surrendering to Him. Send it to someone who needs to hear that the provision is already prepared on the mountain God has already designated, waiting for them to follow the instruction and show up. Because that is what this is about. Not just information, not just inspiration, but transformation. The kind that happens when a person stops managing God and starts trusting Him. The kind that changes not just a plan, but a life. The kind that turns ordinary people into exactly who God knew they were before they were even born. That is your story. That is the life available to you on the other side of surrender. And it starts right now.